think those have been admitted. So
614 has not been.
Oh, 614.
Yep, we got confirmation on that. So if you want to do that, we know.
Thank you. So in addition to 466, the pre-filed testimony with attachments, you've also subsequently caused to be filed additional materials, and I would offer Exhibit 614 at this time.
Are there objections?
Your Honor, we do not object to the admission of this Exhibit 614. I note, however, that we likely will object to walking through hearing exhibits by other attorneys under the guise of friendly cross that are filed on the day of testimony. The board set a deadline for testimony and exhibits, and the practice of filing additional hearing exhibits on the day the testimony is going to happen, just to have other attorneys on the same side of the case walk the witness through those a la direct examination, is something that we will be objecting to.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. We look forward to those objections, unless we don't need to look forward to them. With that, the board will admit the evidence, give it the weight due.
And I'll tender the witness for cross-examination.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Dr. Hocraffer, I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club. There we go. Can we get the KMZ file up? Does this appear to be your property and the pipeline route as far as you know it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you unsure at some point in time where the route actually was going to be?
Actually, the exact route was not new. Well, it was essentially news to me until I actually looked at the summit record. There was no indication given to us what the route was going to be besides corner to corner is pretty much all I knew at the time of information given out to us. And the correspondence that we had with any indication of where it was going to be was pretty moot.
Okay. Yeah. So, did you go to the initial informational meeting that was held by the IUB in your county?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you talk to the land agent immediately after that meeting?
At that time, no. Any correspondence since that point has been with land agents or Summit itself. But at the meeting itself, that was our first exposure to anything about the project, anything having to do with why it was going to be on our farm, anybody that was involved in the project. And so we had no indication of any route at that point.
Okay. So what was the first contact you had with anybody from Summit?
The first contact that we had was through mailings, and my parents immediately rejected the mailings because after the informational meeting, we knew that it was not something that we were going to be interested in at all. That's a fifth-generation farm, and you can see what it would do, without the tile lines up there, but that's a pretty significant cut through that farm. And so the dealings that we had from that point on, there's been multiple contacts. I think my dad accounted for 3 contacts in person. I know the contact log indicated many more. I actually counted 29, and there could have been some business cards left, things like that. But any sort of correspondence, my dad had pretty much indicated there's no interest in any sort of easement.
So did you ever talk to land agents about the route and the impact on the property yourself?
Me personally, yes. So there was the city of Dallas had an informational meeting based on an individual that lived in Dallas, Iowa, that wanted the city council to write a formal request of non-support. And so they had an informational meeting at that point. they had presented, and I was in attendance. We have farms near Dow's as well. I have family in Dow's. We own property in Dow's. And so I attended that. I was asked to attend. One of the land agents approached me afterwards because I typically have a voice. I will speak up when given the opportunity. And he came up to me and he said, "Here's my business card. Have you any interest in, you're an affected landowner, obviously, because you've got a pretty big voice on it." And I will not repeat what I told him, but I will give the indication of I have no interest in you getting your hands on my farm, and I have no interest in signing an easement.
Okay. Was there any discussion with any Summit representatives about an alternative route?
There were not at all. And in fact, there is a possibility of a better route on that farm. If you don't mind, I use a pointer. So this right here,
Along the south edge of your property?
along the south edge of the property right there, that is a grass driveway up to this point right here. So this is all farmed here, and then this is grass driveway right through here.
So, to describe it for the record, the west half of that south edge of your property is a driveway,
Correct.
and
Yes.
the east half of that south edge is farm.
Correct. Yes. And in fact, this property right here,
This is just immediately south of yours.
yes. So my family has farmed this since 1878. It was recently sold by a family member to another group. Part of the hesitancy of me actually investing in this piece of ground here was the fact that we didn't know the status of the pipeline. And so the accessibility for this farm right here is based on this grass driveway right here. That is the only way you can access that farm. There is a opening here in the fence that we have used for years and years and years to actually farm that ground, but is no longer, as of our harvest, we will no longer be farming that. But alternatively, that will take the pipeline out of any sort of tile issues that we were going to have with that, and it would also give more accessibility and keep it away from the buildings. Keep it away from the farmstead.
Did you ever propose that to anybody from Summit?
No, because our interactions with Summit have been very moot. If I spent more than 6 minutes talking to anybody from Summit, then it's probably an over-exaggeration. Because from the very beginning, my parents have been absolutely adamant. There is no way we're dealing with this. There is absolutely no way we're going to sign an easement. There is absolutely no way that we're going to give up to this. And so the one correspondence that my dad had with a live person with this whole situation was on the 23rd of December. We were preparing for Christmas.
This past year?
It would have been, I want to say it was in 2022.
That would be last December.
So it would have been last December. They showed up to the house unannounced, and I wasn't there quite yet. They had arrived prior to me coming home for Christmas, and they kindly asked him to leave, and they said, "We have no interest. We feel sorry for you because you're going to lose a lot of battles here in Wright County because there's a lot of people that are not standing for this." And that was about the summation of the contact that we've had on this with anybody live besides what I've done.
Did any of the Summit representatives mention eminent domain to you?
From the very beginning. Yeah, from the very beginning.
What did they say?
From the informational meeting, it was implied. It was implied several times, and that informational meeting was in Clarion, September of 21. That was pretty much for anybody that had said we are not going to do this, it was implied that was what the result was going to be. Phone calls have indicated that, and like I said, I will not say what my mother usually says to those people. She's kind of had it with the whole situation. But there was a phone call or two that came through. There was the call log and the contact log would give a better indication. I'm trying to draw from memory. But There was several contacts on one day that they had called the house and said, there's a FedEx package on the way, you need to sign it. If you don't sign it, you're not going to get a better deal. We're essentially going to use eminent domain if we have to, so you better jump on board right away. The FedEx package arrived. My father rejected it, and within 5 minutes of the rejection of the package, there was another phone call saying, why didn't you sign this contract? Why didn't you sign this sent to you? And my dad had just hung up. He just hung up on him. You know, my father, he's given his life to the state of Iowa, for lack of better terms. He has been a farm kid his entire life. He graduated from Iowa State University. He's been in extension, 4-H. He was a college professor for a lot of years. And he taught GI classes to returning veterans from the Vietnam War in ag management. He's given his life to agriculture. And so when this started to occur, he had no question of how he was going to respond. He's 4th generation. I'm 5th generation to farm that ground. We have fought our entire lives to protect that ground. And in that situation, it gets you pretty grizzled. You know, we've been through a lot. We made it through the 80s. My grandfather died in the 80s when he had cancer. And my father essentially kept that farm going in the 80s. When my grandfather passed away, he had a brother in college. He essentially helped pay for my uncle's college, his brother, so that he could get a college education and contribute to the health of the state as well. And so when this started, the man has given his entire life to this idea of agriculture. He pretty much just put his heel down. That's why he's not here today. You know, he has just had enough. And so he's 81 years old. He's tired, and this has put him through a lot. So if he says something, it's very calculated, and he's said it many times in his head before he said it.
So it's caused him some stress?
The stress that I've seen on my folks, the stress that I've undergone with this entire situation, a little back history, I'm in healthcare. And there are people that are on the route that I do take care of, not violating any HIPAA regulations, things like that, but I can talk in generals. And I didn't tell him that I was testifying today until Monday morning because I knew he needed to sleep over the weekend. When the pretrial testimony was required to be completed, my mother had fallen and broken both of her arms. Not one, but two. And so she required 24 hours a day care. My sister is a nurse. She had us a job, but she would help too. But it was under the burden of my father, right? So the trial was fast-tracked, and we were trying to get the information, trying to compile it, trying to do all this. And my father was in the midst of trying to take care of my mother as well. I live 46 miles away from my folks, so I couldn't be there every day. But the burden fell on my father, and we have livestock on that farm that he has to take care of twice a day. I've seen him lose probably 30 to 40 pounds over the course of the last 2 years in this situation. And as a matter of perspective, when my grandmother passed away, it's been a little over 10 years ago now, there was a fight to settle the estate, which is a common thing that happens.
I've been there.
Yep. And so my dad has brothers and sisters that live all over the Midwest that have all different ideas about farming and all different ideas about what should be done with the farm, things like that. We were in a battle that we don't talk to them anymore. We'll just say that. Yeah, there was an estate battle, and it was just short of court, but there is no common ground, for lack of better terms, that we have with that the rest of my family now. I have an uncle that he had never left that house. As far as that's the only place he'd ever lived. There were some problems when he was born, and he actually worked for Cargill at the time when he was growing up. He worked for Clarion Co-op, North Iowa Co-op, which is now Gold Eagle Co-op, and he retired with Gold Eagle Co-op, and he was to stay in that house. So he stayed in that house, and he's got some problems that I won't elaborate on, but it causes some violent outbursts. And he was the primary care provider, he was a big brother. You know, he was trying to take care of him. When my grandmother passed away, he had always lived with my grandmother. His stress level went through the roof, not only with the fact of this estate issue that we had battled, but also now my uncle, at the time, we didn't know he had the problems that he did. He is trying to live and work and make sure that his uncle is taken care of, because the rest of the family lives far away, right? Not within driving distance in an hour or two, right? We're talking 5, 6+ hours, most of them. And I saw outbursts with him that were unconscionable, right? So just flat out attacks. His stress level was already very high going into this. During COVID, my uncle moved out of the farm and he built a house in town, which decreased his stress level some, but it took a toll on him. It took a toll. And I can remember the conversation that we had when he called me. He said, "We've got some mail from Summit Carbon Solutions." And I said, "Who the hell are they?" And he said, "Well, we're going to get to know them because they're going to put a pipeline through our farm." And this was in the fall. And I can remember how I responded to that. And I can remember how he responded to that. And I can remember how, at that point, I was pretty frustrated. Because the stress that I was seeing on him it's taking a toll on that man. You know, a man that has just given his entire life to agriculture. It is taking a toll on him because he was there to protect that farm. When my grandfather passed away, my grandfather was a steward of the land. He was an absolute steward. And he would say, "You take care of that because it's going to be passed on."
Are you aware of the risks and dangers of a pipeline like this?
From what I have garnered from this, right, CO2 is an asphyxiant. It will kill you. Plain and simple. It will kill you. They use it in slaughterhouses. They use it to euthanize. And at that high of a concentration, it's deadly within a certain proximity. And I've echoed that. There was an informational meeting. The Wright County Board of Supervisors had a safety meeting. I can't recall the date it was, but it was this summer, I believe. And Summit representatives were there talking, and they had a representative from Fort Dodge, which would be the EMS location for the farm. It's a little bit closer than Mason City. Mason City's 60-ish miles away. Fort Dodge is about 45. And I flat out asked them, I said, and I will quote this because there were representatives of Gold Eagle that were there in the same meeting that were arguing that this is the safest thing that ever was. I flat out looked at the gentleman. I don't know his name. I could point him out, if I saw him again. I said, "If I drive my 100,000-pound semi across this pipeline and it ruptures, is it going to kill me?" And he did not say no. He looked right at me, and I garnered from his response, yes, it is going to kill you if it ruptures and you're over the top of it. It doesn't matter how deep in the ground it is. If it comes up, and I would like to say I'm a pretty fit individual. If I had to run, I can't run 3 minutes without oxygen. I've tried. It doesn't work. I can make about 30 seconds without oxygen at this point, and I consider myself fit.
As I recall from the KMZ map, there are some buildings or structures fairly close to where the pipeline would be?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Are those residences?
So there is a house that was built on that farm in 1940 by my grandfather's own hand that would be a future residence for me Not currently. There's not anybody living in there because after my uncle moved out, then the determination of that property and of that house was that I would use it when I'm farming. So 46 miles one way is a long ways to drive, and driving down, I would stay in the house so that I could farm. There's a shop right next to it that I've invested heavily in because I wanted to continue farming. My plan is to continue farming after I retire from healthcare, and so I've invested in the shop so that my father's never had a heated shop in his life. He's always worked in cold. He's always had livestock. So we were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to be able to build a shop, and he spends more time in that shop now than he spends at home because that place is his home. That place is his sanctuary. And that's something that moving forward, I plan on using that house as a residence. I plan on living in that house, for a good majority of the time. And that shop I invested in that shop because I believed in the fact that I want to continue farming. And so there's buildings there that are going to be imperative to me being able to farm in the future. And GPS to me is grab, point, and steer, right? So I don't have GPS equipment. I don't push a button and it goes across the field. I've got equipment from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, some 80s, right? So the fact that we're small farmers. I do it because it's not going to make me a living. I do it because of my heritage. I'm obligated to do this because 5th generation and nobody else has farmed this ground. And so those buildings are going to allow me to do that and continue on the legacy that my grandfather started, continue on the legacy that my father continued, and hopefully I can add to it. But there's livestock on that farm. I showed sheep when I was a kid. I showed hogs when I was a kid. My nieces still show sheep. There's chickens. There's livestock on that farm. And there always has been livestock on that farm.
So they could be impacted by a pipeline rupture too.
Without doubt. And they don't know any better. How do they shelter in place? They die in place is what they do. There's no sheltering for livestock.
You mentioned that either Fort Dodge or
Mason City was the other.
Mason City would
Yes,
be
sir.
the closest. But aren't there some smaller towns that would have some emergency response personnel?
Yeah, so Clarion is 4 miles away. So and it's a direct drive. It's a straight drive. The hospital is on the south side of Clarion, so it's actually about 3.5 miles to the hospital, 4 miles to the Highway 3 junction, essentially. And so they would respond. But in the past, my brother-in-law was on the ambulance crew. My sister triages at the hospital from time to time. So any of those first responders that are going to be out there, they're friends of us. They're friends of my family. They have familiarity with us. They are going to be taking care of people that they have prior knowledge of in that small town. And as far as their equipment goes, I can't talk to that because I don't know. I haven't had a conversation with anybody there about that. I do have a significant other that she is at EMS up in Forest City, and it scares me to death that she has to go out on a call. It scares me to death that my sister has to treat these folks if something happens. It scares me to death the fact that the ambulance people, they come out there, they're going to know me, they're going to know my family, they're going to know anybody that's out there. It's a high-pressure situation to know somebody's dying and not being able to do anything about it.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Others may have questions.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor? Sorry. Looked at the wrong name. Ms. Ryan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ryan.
I just have a few follow-up questions
Sure.
about your testimony. You
Sure.
said several times that you're the 5th generation farming the land.
Yes,
Are there
ma'am.
plans for it to go to a 6th?
Yes, there are. I don't have any direct heirs, but I have 2 nieces. And the intent was always to, the agreement is after my parents pass and pass the farm on to me and my sister, is that as long as I do not have any heirs, it's going to go to my nieces. So that would be the 6th generation to farm it. We achieved century farm status in 1978, and we're approaching heritage status on the farm. And it has only been farmed by my family, direct descendants, the entire time. So it has only been in my family. It has only been farmed by people that have influenced my life directly through our heritage. Yes.
See, for generations, your family has devoted itself to this land.
Objection.
States the objection.
Asked and answered several times, as well as it's on page 1 of the direct testimony.
I'll move on.
Thank you.
After all of that time
Mm-hmm.
of your family working this land,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing there's also been a lot of money put into it.
You know, we've never been rich. We've never been a rich farm family. Anything that we've had, we have scraped, clawed, bit, kicked in order to maintain. And so we about lost that family in the 80s, or that farm in the 80s. And since then, there were times where I went a year or two without shoes. And the only thing that we had at that time was that farm. And my family grew up on that farm. They raised food on that farm. I can remember my grandmother only going to town for bread and going to town for sugar and flour. That was it. Because we had a garden the size of half this room that I essentially was raised off of. And we would kill the livestock and eat the livestock that we raised. And that farm was self-contained. At one time, there was 3 families that lived on that farm. In the early 1900s, there were 3 farm families on that farm. And so the money that has been invested in that farm has only been so that it would pay us back, to give us back. And the fact that we wanted to continue the heritage that we have built. And I've invested a lot of time since I've been back in the state. I came back to the state. I was practicing out of state so that I could continue that heritage. And I've invested my time. I've invested a lot of money, a lot of equipment so that I could continue to do so. So yes, I would agree that there's been a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of sweat equity invested into that farm.
And it sounds like you've been making long-term planning decisions based on this farm.
Since 1975. I was born in 1975, and I have no brothers. So from day one, it was my task in life to continue to farm.
Do you think it's fair at this point in your family's business for someone to come in and change the rules about who gets to use your property?
So let me elaborate on that. I work for myself for a reason. I went into healthcare for a reason. Because I was always told that we don't have enough money, enough resources for you to make a living on this farm. And they said, you have to have a city job in order to be able to do what you love. And when somebody walks into your home, harasses your family, threatens you, makes it known that they have moral superiority of what your farm needs over you, I take that personally. And I've taken it personally since day one. And I've taken it personally every second that I've tried to fight it. Because there's a commonality that I find with patients, and I think it makes me an effective healthcare provider, that there's a level that you have to maintain with yourself in order to reach a level that your patients need you to be at. So you go to the level that you need. So I've taken care of CEOs, and I've also taken care of ditch workers, right? So ditch diggers. You meet them at a level that they need you at in order to help them in the greatest level. Not at one point have I felt like they have met a level with my family that makes them genuine to what they want to do with my farm is ever going to be in agreement with what I want. Because if somebody is dictating what happens with my farm, I can't tile future. You saw the line, right? That is from corner to corner on my farm. That's in 2 drainage districts. There is tile in that farm that has been there since my grandfather hand dug it in the 1940s. It's clay tile. If it's disrupted, it will disrupt the entire drainage district on our farm. If somebody tells me that they have moral superiority over what they know better for my land is, I'm pushing back as hard as I can, because there's nobody more qualified to run that farm right now than my father. And until he dies, it's going to be me after that. I consider it a bully move, completely. You know, if you're not meeting somebody at the level that they need from you to find an agreement, it would have been different if they approached it from the standpoint of, we have this proposal, we have this thought process, hey, we can both benefit from this. In fact, if they would have met us at that level, that would have been a different conversation, I think. But the fact that the manager of the Gold Eagle Co-op at the first informational meeting was the first person to stand up and say, we can get you a couple cents more per bushel per every bushel that you bring to us, which is also lower, mind you, than what the average is in the areas, because we have to haul 16 miles now instead of hauling 4 miles, which we have done for a very, very long time. That if somebody says to me, we're going to do this for you, but we're going to take it from you in order to do it, how do you not fight against that? Like, how would you not stand up against that? And the fact that when something like that happens, I'm of German origin, I'm of Irish origin, and I'm of Native American origin, I'm going to fight back. It's in my nature. I'm going to fight back. Absolutely. Without a doubt. And the fact that, you know, I don't like being told what to do. When I came up here, I didn't even go through the right spots over there like the rat in the little maze, right? So I went underneath the ropes, you know, and it wasn't because I wanted to do it, it's because I had to do it. So when it comes to things like that, I tend to choose my own path. And sometimes it gets me in trouble, sometimes it doesn't. But you know what? At the end of the day, I know that if I fought for what is right, then I can sleep at night knowing that I did everything I can possibly do.
And to follow up on some of what you talked about there, in your testimony, you specifically used the word stalking to describe Summit's conduct. Can you provide some specific examples of what you mean by stalking?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So, you know, I'll be honest, I'm not a saint. I've had stalkers in my life, and it's happened to me, and I know what it's like to be followed. And I know what it's like to have people constantly watching your moves, every move, right? It seems to me the feeling that I had was that from the very first moment of contact, and the contact log is not accurate. It's not even close to being accurate. But the contact log does reflect a few incidences where they were following my family. So there were times where they would keep an eye on, and they would drive by the house. My dad said he saw out-of-state plates driving around the house a couple times. You know, I can't swear to that, but what my dad tells me, I'll tell you what, if he tells me something, I believe it as being true, right? So having somebody stalk around, trying to find any information they can on you, trying to make sure that their moral superiority is being met so that they can get their goals met, for lack of better terms. That's what we're after here, right? There's a goal. That just let us be in peace. Let us live in peace. You know, we are here trying to feed the country and live our lives and do the right thing for my ancestry. And the fact that if you're following us around trying to see where your edge was that you could get in and to see, oh, we'll get them at a weak point, that's what I've felt like since the very beginning of this. Absolutely 100%. If somebody's after you, they're gonna relent. They're gonna stalk you until they get what they want, and that's what I've felt this entire time.
One final question. In your testimony, you expressed concern that tax dollars would be used for the pipeline. What were you referring to when you mentioned tax dollars?
The 45 credits, the 45Q credits, and is it 45Z credits? I think I'm not familiar, you know, to put my heel on either of those. But to me, it seems to be a problem that tax dollars are being used for a project that the conversations that I've had about the tax dollar usage was that if you take my farm from me, then you're going to use my money to pay me back for it. So you're taking my money twice. That's kind of an interesting argument, because eminent domain, you can't put a price on my farm, for number one. Like, there is no price that I will separate that from my heritage. That is my heritage that is on that farm. That eminent domain my farm and then pay me a penance and then take it back over the course of how many years for the taxes? Like, I pay taxes like everybody else, but then your neighbor's paying taxes, and anybody else that's paying taxes is supporting the fact that my farm is being taken, and then they're paying the people that took my farm to make a profit off of my tax dollars. I think there's a conflict there. I think there's a big conflict, because, you know, who likes to pay taxes? I'm not one that likes to pay taxes. I like the fact of where the taxes go a lot of times to help people, but I don't like paying quarterlies like everybody else, right? But if you take my tax dollars and then you slap me in the face by saying your tax dollars are going to go to this cause in this carbon credit capture situation, and then after you take my farm from me, you're going to pay me back with my own money? So I'm paying for it twice, essentially. So, yeah, not a fan. Not a fan at all.
And I should know better than to say I just have one last question, because I do actually have an additional question. I understand that you filed a hearing exhibit at the last minute.
Yeah.
Can you explain why you did not file that earlier?
Sure, absolutely, I can. And there is a very, in my eyes, it's justifiable, not in everybody's eyes. I'm not a lawyer, obviously. During the time of the fast tracking of the hearing, prior to, my mother fell and broke both of her arms. And during that time, with the 24-hour care that my father had to give, there was a lot of information that we had that we could not compile. And that in itself is not an excuse, but the fact that I have seen my father paralyzed in his ability to make decisions only a few times in my life. The last time was when my grandmother passed away, and he was sitting across the table from me after my grandmother's funeral, and he had a beer in his hand, and he doesn't drink beer very often. He said, "Just wait, this is starting to begin." And the estate fight followed after that. The stress level that my parents have been under, the stress level that I've been under, is very difficult to have a clear, concise thought process in order to construct an argument against this, right? So the last minute filings, the stress that I have been under, I haven't slept in 5 days, to be honest with you. And I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one that has gone through the stress of having to deal with being put up here to defend what is yours. And the fact that there's points of clarity in the middle of the night sometimes. So I might have to thank, Summit for allowing me to stay up all night, because there were some good thought processes that I had, as far as dealing with the stress levels and things like that, that moving forward, I think I can help people with the stress levels and dealing with my own health issues, dealing with those stress levels. I've had some challenges. And part of those challenges have been to be able to construct an argument. And constructing that argument has been imperative to me, being able to feel like I've defended what is mine and defended the rights of my family and defended the rights of the people that, there's people that don't have a voice that are in this fight as well. And those things have been pretty difficult to just get my hands around, just get my head around. And that's why, because this is a difficult time. I mean, it's a very difficult time. And it's been very challenging, to say the least.
And can you give just a general explanation of why you think the information in that exhibit is important?
There's information in that exhibit that I think it's very important from the standpoint of, there's information about how people deal with stress. And there's information on how people deal with the fact that Iowa State University is one of the things that I submitted because they have a helpline for the agricultural community, and that agricultural community needs its help because it's an arguable amount of percentages, but depending on which source that you ask, ag workers are about 30 to 40% more likely to have suicide per 100,000 than the general population. And I think that's very important information because I don't have a lot of doubt in my mind that there's probably going to be somebody that is not going to take this very well. If this pipeline is constructed, there's going to be problems. And the mental health of the farmers after COVID, I see this every day. You know, I'm not a licensed mental health care provider, but what I do deal with, people tell me things and they tell me what they're dealing with. And they tell me the stresses that they're under. And this has been a very, very prominent conversation piece in my clinic, that people will engage me because they know that I am outspoken about it. And they know that I'm outspoken for a lot of reasons. You know, they know that I'm outspoken because I've had my struggles contacting legislators. I've had my struggles getting somebody to listen.
Objection.
State the objection.
I want to object to the lengthy narrative response to the question, which was, can you give a general idea of what's in the documents?
Ms. Ryan?
It is a long response, but I think that the witness obviously feels it's important to share this information.
Right. But do you want to tie
That's
it
my
into
final question.
Okay. Do you want to tie it into the exhibits?
No, I think this is,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
That's all I asked for was general
Perfect. Thank you.
information.
Okay. Ms. Colas, sorry. Are you done? Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Sorry. Ms. Colas, your tag was up and now it's down. Just making sure we didn't fall over. We don't miss you.
No, he answered my 3 questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. With no other questions, Mr. Jorde for redirect.
Thank you, Doctor. You've been very comprehensive. So I just, essentially, are you here to protect your family and your dad from the ongoing stress that this project is causing them?
Yeah, for lack of better perspective, then I would not subject him to this. You know, I would not subject him to being under scrutiny and under the lights and under the vision, and the state of Iowa is watching. You know, he's had his struggles. You know, he's been in real estate his entire life. He's been on the stand many times. In fact, we had talked about this a couple days ago, and he said there's been a lot of times where he's been on the stand because he does real estate appraisal, and he was put under the microscope for his knowledge. And I said, Dad, there is no way that I'm going to subject you to this because I have to deal with this the rest of my life. You only have to deal with it with the time you're remaining. And to me, that is very important to me, being his son and being a person in this family that needs to defend it. And I have the ability to speak. I've always had the ability to speak. Thank you for all the county presentations that my mother forced me to do when I was in 4-H when I was younger. But it's very important to me that I stand up for my family. It's very important to me that I take this position to help them. Absolutely.
And so you've probably heard testimony about the financial stress and the time component, and you're kind of tying that together to the what people often in rural communities don't talk about, which is the mental anguish this is causing them, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can only speak from my own perspective because I'm only responsible for me ultimately, you know, when it comes to my health. And I have this conversation quite often with people. I can attest back to a situation that happened here not that long ago where I was on a Zoom meeting for people that were opposed to the pipeline. And I was asked to speak, and I was asked to speak about my experiences with dealing with trying to get my voice out there and dealing with legislators and dealing with anybody that would listen, you know, that had some power to help. And after about a 15 minutes of time that I was speaking, I checked my pulse and I checked my blood pressure because I had been struggling with blood pressure at that point. And what I recorded was 210 over 115. And as a healthcare provider, if somebody comes in with 210 over 115 into my clinic, they are not in my clinic very long. And I knew that this was a problem for me, and this pipeline has brought this out of me. I know it's contributed. I'm not going to say it's the only thing, but I'm going to say it has contributed. The fact that I should have been in the ER after just speaking about this. And so it's something I have to watch very closely now. The stress levels that I've undergone, there's a process in the human body where if you're under stress, you get an elevated level of cortisol. So this elevated level of cortisol has an effect on the sympathetic nervous system. And when it affects the sympathetic nervous system, it affects hormone balances. So the hormone balances that are going to be most pertinent to this conversation is going to be melatonin and serotonin. Okay, so melatonin is a common aid for people that sleep. Well, if you have correct balances of melatonin and serotonin, your awake and sleep cycle are going to be balanced, right? So if you're an 8-hour a night person, your serotonin is going to be balanced with your melatonin. But with me, I'm an individual that is not that way. So having a high level of stress increases cortisol levels, and it will rob me of serotonin. So if it robs me of serotonin, then when I take a melatonin product, that melatonin product converts itself to serotonin. So serotonin is the waking hormone. Melatonin is the sleeping hormone. Putting it simply. So if you take a melatonin product and you're lacking in serotonin, it will convert it. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is because they are sister hormones. They'll convert back and forth as needed. If I take melatonin, I will wake straight up. I cannot take it at all. I have to take serotonin in order to get some sleep, which is absolutely opposite. And so I have a lot of sleep pattern issues. I have not slept an entire night for 2 years.
And you attribute that, at least in part, to the stresses and the responsibilities you feel relative to this pipeline.
It is a stress response in individuals. It is a stress response in me. And I would say that they're not only me, but this is a common problem in a lot of people that I deal with high levels of stress. Do I say that it contributes to my sleep patterns? This is very definite. Yeah, I don't have any question. This is contributing to it. It's not the only thing in my life that causes me stress, but this is something that does affect me for sure.
Okay. I appreciate that and your perspective. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. You're excused. Appreciate it. Mr. Jorde?
Yes. Kent Koziski, please.